Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. I think we'll get started again. Ms. Loneker, if you want to come forward and go ahead and proceed whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, good morning, Treasurer Bertrand, Auditor Gill, Attorney Loomis. Thank you for the opportunity to be considered as a candidate for the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors. Over the past several weeks, I've heard from Woodbury County citizens about the need to bring an additional voice with increased perspective and balance, experience, and fiscal discipline to the Board of Supervisors. Considering these important qualities, I believe that I'm uniquely qualified and, after 25 years of professional experience and service to Siouxland and 2 months of attending these various county meetings, also properly prepared to fill this role. I'm capable of doing it with a limited learning curve, which would allow me, if selected, to really hit the ground running. First and foremost, addressing the perceived desire of voters for perspective and balance, it's become quite clear to me that Woodbury County citizens are seeking a supervisor with a broad personal and professional insight capable of bringing additional balance to this body. My personal outlook is informed by a lifetime of rural living. A Siouxland native, I grew up in the country and where my family raised cattle, practiced and competed in rodeo at both the state and national level, and ran a refrigerated long-haul trucking company. My work ethic was formed at a very early age with a long list of daily chores, daily roping practice twice a day, and a rigorous academic schedule at school. After graduating from Heelan High School, I earned a degree in business marketing from Iowa State University and worked for 3 years in California and Arizona before returning to Iowa to join the family business, where I worked in the trucking industry for a decade. Subsequent to this, I transitioned to serve in a role as the marketing director for the Sioux Gateway Airport. And over the course of my career, I have been consistently entrusted with additional responsibilities, including economic development, regional transportation, air service development, government relations, and community enhancement initiatives throughout our community. My husband and I chose to raise our family on an acreage in rural Woodbury County and are the parents of 2 adult children. We built our home on a gravel road just east of Sioux City and have never regretted that decision. While our 2 children left Siouxland to pursue their college educations, after earning their degrees, they've both returned back to Siouxland to pursue their professional careers in education and engineering, respectively. Having raised my family, my schedule now allows me the time and to focus on public service, and after countless conversations regarding the vacancy, I'm convinced that my rural roots, coupled with my work in the Siouxland business community, will bring a beneficial viewpoint to the Board of Supervisors. Furthermore, my selection and service would bring a historically and currently underrepresented frame of reference to the board. Second, I'm confident that my professional experience is well suited to serve the people of Woodbury County. With over 2 decades of professional business experience in Siouxland, my background will complement the current composition of this board. I helped negotiate the single largest economic development project in the history of Woodbury County at CF Industries. I also participated in the confidential discussions that resulted in multiple expansions at AGP, totaling nearly $200 million. Collectively, my direct involvement in these economic development opportunities in rural Woodbury County represent nearly $3 billion in capital investment, and I'm enormously proud of my role in growing Woodbury County's employment, investment, and tax base. In addition, for over a decade, I've been directly involved in the effort to add an interchange on Interstate 29 near Port Neal. I also helped resurrect and lead the Seaboard Triumph Foods Expo Center project at the former John Morrell site, which has been a great asset to our tri-state community. Finally, as Woodbury County works to maintain the level of financial discipline our taxpayers have come to expect in the allocation of their hard-earned dollars, I bring a history of fiscal responsibility, which has been among my top priorities in both my public and private sector roles. I have a strong desire to make things better for my community, and I have a history of doing so, whether it be in my role in air service development for our regional airport, advancing quality of life initiatives, working in economic development throughout Siouxland, or serving on several nonprofit boards. It's been said that if you want to make a difference, you can't sit on the sidelines, you need to jump in, and that's really what led me here today. As you finalize your decision to fill the vacancy on the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors, I hope that the perspective and balance, experience, and fiscal discipline reflected in both my personal and professional background will compel you to select me to serve in this important role. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sloniker. Ms. Bertrand?
Thank you, Ms. Loneker, for coming here today. First question that I have is, you have quite a bit of committee experiences and you're sitting on a lot of boards and things like that. So how do you see your current involvement with your work, your job, and your other committees that you represent or you sit on, you participate in, and how that will impact your ability to serve the county as a board supervisor, along with the committee assignments that you'll receive from the board?
I think the most important thing is the roles of the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors are very well aligned, I guess, with my background and my service on those other entities that you suggested. I'm a person who likes to get things done. I like to be busy, and I think I'm well suited to be able to juggle those responsibilities. I've been doing that for many years.
Do you see any conflict of interest that might arise, particularly if you're involved in some of the expansion or the economic development to Woodbury County, and how that might create a potential conflict of interest as a board supervisor, that where you may or may not be able to vote on something?
That's a very good question. I would say that with anyone who has outside responsibilities other than the Woodbury County Board, so working for whatever company you may work for, conflicts may arise. And I am definitely willing and able to recognize those. And if there are such, then recuse myself from a vote. But I would also say I would probably look to Attorney Loomis to, give advice to that effect if I was ever uncertain of whether I did in fact have a conflict of interest.
Okay. Given some of the issues that we've had in the rural county, the rural area of our county over the last couple of months with the wind energy and the carbon pipeline, what would be your greatest asset that you would bring to the table to be able to bridge some of those issues? Because it's part of that, rural lifestyle, economic development, urban living, and everything that is Woodbury.
Okay, well, to start off, I think that my background, having both the rural background and being able to work in the urban setting also, and the ability that I've been representing all of these people for the last many years in my professional capacity, whether it be in quality of life initiatives, statewide commissions that I've been on, such as the Iowa College Aid Commission. I think I have that background that says I can represent those people, and I guess I have the ability to bring the right people together to make decisions, to actually sit people down, pro and con. I attended most of the meetings during the issues happening, with the wind turbines, and really got to see the perspective of what the county residents wanted. And I think they presented it in a very straightforward, well thought out way. And we came to resolution. I think the county board came to resolution after listening to what the county residents had to say.
And again, with potential conflict of interest, how would you represent, if you are the person actually working with Siouxland Chamber of Commerce to be able to bring somebody to the rural area that might impact the rural residents, would that again be an issue where you would have to recuse yourself, or?
I think I could be involved, but in that case, I would be working on behalf of representing actually the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors. I can tell you it happens quite often if you're familiar with the Siouxland Initiative, which is the economic development part. We are a tri-state chamber. We work with entities throughout the three states. So we work with different cities, the different counties, and when we have a prospect for economic development, everything is, I don't want to say the word siloed, but it is kept confidential between communities. Community A doesn't know Community B's involved or not involved. So I think I have a track record of never being tripped up on that over all the 25 years. We just don't. We keep things confidential, and we work on behalf of whomever the client would be at the time.
Okay.
Am I out of time?
That's our time there.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Bertrand.
Thank you.
Mr. Gill?
Thank you, Mrs. Sloniker. Thank you for applying. My question is, the board of Woodbury County had in place a economic development director. And we've had two of them, and with limited success, I guess. And at this point, the board is considering whether or not to replace that person and put that position, make it active. Do you think that should happen? And if it should, what could we do to improve what they are doing?
Well, at this time, I guess I'd need to know a little more about you're sizing it up, saying we've had limited success, whether success is defined as what projects we brought into the county or such. But economic development in general in the county is different size for different parts of the county. I can see with the port, with the new interchange at Port Neal, that there would probably be industrial development maybe in that area, which you might not want to be putting in Anthon or Odo, for example. But the most important thing is to grow the tax base of the county, which benefits all residents, rural or urban. So whether or not the county board should move forward in hiring a new economic development director, I think it's, for me, I don't believe I have enough information to make a recommendation at this time. But I would definitely like to know more about that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Gill? Good morning, Ms. Sloniker. Thanks
Good
for
morning.
taking the time. You said you have a strong desire to make things better. So what is it that needs to be made better?
Well, as I just mentioned, growing the tax base, continuing to grow the tax base, and continuing to listen to the taxpayers of Woodbury County, because ultimately that's who funds the department, or the departments, if you will. The county needs to provide the services to allow each part of the county to grow, and a lot of that is deciding with conversations with those different parts of the county, what is their vision of growth for their area, and how does that fit into the overall view of economic development for the county. I mean, Woodbury County needs to remain to be a safe place with, as we mentioned earlier, the sheriff's office having, the resources they need, as well as, the 3 elected offices here to move our county forward.
What's your vision for the county moving forward?
That's my vision. Again, start off by having great quality of life, because we know in a workforce crunch, people flock to where there are things to do once you are done with your job. So quality of life, fiscal discipline, where I know that my hard-earned tax dollars are being spent wisely and for the good of the entire county, not just one section of the county. And going along with that, strategic economic development, such that we're right-sizing economic development for each part of the county or for the county in general. And I think you saw some of that with the discussion about the windmills, where the county at large was saying, this isn't what we want. We don't see that as our economic growth.
Are you willing to go out to those different communities and see what economic development needs that they have, given what your experience is? Anthon's is different than Odo's. Pearson's is different than Hornick's. It's different than Smithland's. They're all different. How do you approach that? How do you go about doing that in terms of finding out what their needs are?
Well, I guess to answer your question, yes, I'm definitely interested in doing that. I'm very, very willing and interested to go out and talk with all those different groups. I mean, it's what I do. It's what I've been doing for 25 years. I mean, I enjoy the interaction. I enjoy that listening portion of it, and I enjoy learning something new every day. So I can't begin to say right now that I know all the issues that an Anthon or a Odo would have versus a Lawton or a Mobile, but the only way you find out is going out and listening. So I would hope to be part of conversations out in the county.
Thank you, Ms. Sloniker. Appreciate your time here this morning.
Thank you.
Mr. Nelson? Good morning, Mr. Nelson.
Good morning, how are you?
Good. Go ahead and begin when you're ready, sir.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Mark Nelson, and I live on a farm in rural Correctionville with my wife and children. I'm originally from Mobile, where I grew up on the family farm and did my K through 12 education at Woodbury Central. After graduation, I went off to Iowa State University, where I acquired a degree in agricultural studies. While in college, I started an e-commerce retail business, which I brought to Mobile upon my graduation in 2013. I also returned to the family farm with my dad and brother and got on the Woodbury County Farm Bureau board. I have been a board director ever since and treasurer since 2014. My e-commerce retail business grew, and I had to move into a physical brick and mortar store in my hometown of Mobile in 2015, which presented amazing challenges and opportunities. I became the president of the Woodbury County Cattlemen's in 2018, a position that I held until 2022. And in 2018, I somehow found the time to co-start another business. I ran both of those businesses successfully until I sold them in 2020 to focus primarily on farming. In my time with Farm Bureau, I have been part of our biggest investments in the county to date. The first was a major contribution to help build the Sioux City Children's Museum, and the second was to start Siouxland Agriculture in the classroom. In fact, my wife helped the Children's Museum design many of the exhibits that are still in use today, and she was the first director of Siouxland Ag in the Classroom. Siouxland Ag in the Classroom is a nonprofit that brings ag education into elementary schools to help connect farmers and consumers. Many children in Sioux City schools like Spalding Park, Holy Cross, Perry Creek, Liberty, Siouxland Christian, and rural schools like Lawton Bronson, Woodbury Central, River Valley, Danbury Catholic, and countless others have been a recipient of this program at no cost because of funding efforts that I and others have worked so hard to attain. I've even been in person or virtually in many of these classrooms teaching and sharing my passion for agriculture. The annual tractor ride I put on has highlighted nearly every town in the county, even bringing tractors to Camp High Hopes. This led Farm Bureau to becoming a sponsor of their summer barbecue fundraiser and a cheerleader for their cause. All three groups that I'm involved with are county-wide, serving all residents and trying to make the county a better place. Another of my projects is the Beef Passport Contest. We promoted local restaurants in nearly every town of the county and Sioux City, bringing tens of thousands of additional retail dollars to this county and bringing people from all walks of life to see what Woodbury County has to offer. I come before you today seeking the supervisor's seat for District 3, and I believe I am qualified for this post for a number of reasons. Reason 1, I have the business background needed to manage the county. The supervisors are the business manager of the county, and my wide experience owning and running businesses in multiple industries will most assuredly prove beneficial. 2, I have been entrusted with the public's money for many years. As treasurer of Woodbury County Farm Bureau, an almost 3,000 member nonprofit organization, I have been responsible for overseeing the revenues, expenses, budgeting, and auditing for hundreds of thousands of our member dollars without incident. 3, I have worked with department heads and elected officials in our government for years, past and current supervisors, our county engineer, and our current and former sheriff. 4, I have knocked on doors, sat at kitchen tables, and visited hundreds of county residents in the past year about their needs and visions of the county. I co-led one of the largest county petitions in history and co-led some of the largest turnouts for supervisor meetings in history, all while conducting ourselves in a civil and professional manner despite a very emotional issue. For years, I have attended supervisor meetings for a broad array of issues and have managed to get other people in the county involved with county government. 5, I have also taken the time to reach out to many of our town mayors, especially in District 3, to listen to them about their wants and needs in the county. And I'm proud to say that I have support of 6 of those town mayors, including Lawton, Mobile, Correctionville, Anthon, Danbury, and Hornick. Finally, I'd like to make sure that this body knows one thing about me and my public work. All of my time serving this county in various groups and activities have been without any sort of compensation to me or my family. It has been a total donation of my time, talents, and even financial resources, and for the betterment of Woodbury County. I do all of these things because I am a servant leader. I live to serve, and I am excited for the opportunity to serve on a higher level. I have my finger on the pulse of the people in this county, and I'm always a champion for the little guy. I want to help this county grow and prosper for years to come. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Ms. Bertrand?
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. So, can you describe a little bit more about what your employment is currently, and kind of listening to your opening statement and reviewing the resume? Are you an entrepreneur where you have your own business, your relationship with Farm Bureau?
Sure.
Or the Farm Bureau group?
So currently I am self-employed as a farmer, but I also work with my brother and dad as part of a larger family operation as well. So I work with them, but I also have my own books and my own business that I manage as far as the farm. The retail and transportation business that I cited in my resume, I sold those off in 2020. And as far as Farm Bureau, that is a That is complete volunteer. I get no compensation for that. I just attend monthly meetings and lots of subsequent other meetings throughout, whether it's the budget process or, the policy days with capital coming up. This first session is very busy, visiting with politicians, that sort of thing. But all that is donation of my time.
Okay. And do you see any conflicts of interest or anything that would impact your ability to serve as a supervisor and the assigned committees that supervisors fill?
No, not this time. For the reason I'm self-employed, I'm my own boss. As far as my involvement with like Farm Bureau and the cattlemen, those larger groups have bylaws that do not allow elected officials to serve on their board of directors. I can still be a member, but I cannot serve on the board in the capacity that I have in the past. So I would have to give up those elective seats on those posts. But otherwise, I do not see any conflict of interest, no.
Okay. Can you explain or discuss your understanding of the role of the Board of Supervisors, the relationship between the other duly elected officials, and your understanding of the autonomy of the offices and how the compensation board?
Sure.
plays
So, like we had in the questionnaire, and it's the neat thing about the Iowa Code, it's a lot to read, but it kind of lays out a lot of that stuff in there. It's kind of a handbook for day-to-day activities. But, the department heads and the elected officials put together their budgets in a timely manner to submit to the Board of Supervisors. And then, like we've been doing for the last several weeks, we go through and we either, keep those numbers or we try to trim them down. The board certifies the taxes and then the tax rate, and then it becomes the job of the treasurer and the auditor to collect those taxes. The county attorney, they help guide the board and make sure they're staying within their legal parameters and advise them on various issues or conflicts of interest, things of those nature. The board sets the salaries for those elected officials, but they don't necessarily report to the board. And so likewise with the county compensation board, they come together, they have their meeting, they decide, what the pay increase or decrease should be, and then the board can weigh that with what they're looking at as far as budget constraints and what their tax policy for fiscal policy wants to be for that year. So yeah, I guess if you have any questions, I can keep going.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Gill?
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I guess over the years, there's really been aware of the relationship between the Farm Bureau and the Board of Supervisors. And we used to have Jack Burright used to come all the time, and all he was ever concerned was with the levy rate and that sort of thing. So can you explain to me what you think the Farm Bureau's relationship with the Board of Supervisors should be?
I was lucky enough to get on the board when Jack Burright was still there, and got to spend a lot of meetings with Jack, and he was always a fighter on the tax rates. I know exactly where you're coming from. The neat thing about Farm Bureau is we are grassroots. We answer strictly to our members. And so for like our February board meeting, we're going to have the supervisors out, and we try to be that line of communication between the average people in the county and our elected officials. And we have the county sheriff out usually once a year. We have the county engineer out. So we try to have this relationship where for all of us to be able to thrive and do our jobs, we got to have the right intel and the right information to get that done. And I think that Farm Bureau provides that avenue for people to come to us, come to our board meetings. And we're, the representatives of our county Farm Bureau board are every township in the county, plus at-large directors. So we represent the entire Woodbury County. No other counties, nothing to do with the state, just Woodbury County. And I think that's important because we get all kinds of information from lots of residents on different issues. And that's what makes us really strong, because we have lots of knowledge and information.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Gill?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Nelson.
Morning.
In your letter, you state that the wheels in an entrepreneur's mind are always turning. And then you go on to kind of talk about some of the things that you've done, which I appreciate. What makes a good entrepreneur?
First is identifying a problem, right? Identifying the problem and then saying, how could we make this better? How could we make it cheaper? How can we make people's lives better? And I think that's what I look to every day is how can I, in my capacity, try to make my family, my neighbors, my county, my town better. And that's what really fuels a lot of my involvement is always trying to make that next step and make that next thing better.
You said you want to be a servant leader.
Yep.
What makes a good servant leader?
Well, the first thing you got to be able to listen, have understanding, empathy, grace. I think those are all very important qualities. I think that a lot of times we look at leaders and that we say are leaders, and they're really just pushers, right? And I'm the type where I want to set the example. I want to do right. I want to be doing right. I want to make a coalition that says, hey, that this guy's really in it for the right reasons and doing the right things, and I think I want to be a part of that. And I think that's what a servant leader really is, and that's what I strive to do on all of my public works. I want to make the tent bigger. We can only get so much done on our own. We got to have a coalition behind us.
Sure, and your experience in agriculture is probably different than some of the other candidates' experiences in here that is not related to agriculture. How do you blend those two together?
So again, it comes down to getting the information, and that's why when we went and did things like Still Ag in the classroom, we wanted to bring voices together, because it does no good to stand across the aisle and yell at each other, right? We have to open up and have those conversations. In my resume, I also put an event about Dine at the County Line. I didn't have time to put that in here today, but that was an event that we put on where we provided a free, very nice meal, and we invited members of the community, largely out of Sioux City, to come and participate, where we sat them at tables with farmers and rural landowners to ask questions. So we would ask for people in the media, politicians, professors, teachers, lawyers, doctors, housewives, anybody that had just a general inkling or an interest of what goes on out in the rural areas to come to this event and set up that dialogue where we could communicate with each other. And I think that I have a history of bringing people together and wanting to bring people together to understand both sides of the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Appreciate your time here this morning.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Mr. Wick? Good morning, Mr. Wick. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And I want to thank everybody that's here also. I think we got a great group of people here. It's interesting that when you open something up like this, you get this many applicants for it. It shows that people care about where they live and about the county. I'm Todd Wick, and I'm asking you to consider me for the vacated District 3 seat in Woodbury County Board of Supervisors. I spent over 30 years working for the citizens of this great county and as a member of the Woodbury County Sheriff's Office before retiring December 31st of 2020. I was a loyal and dedicated employee of the Sheriff's Office and the citizens of this county. I spent my career striving to make the county a safe place for families. Without a safe community, families and businesses cannot thrive. I would like the opportunity to continue this effort as a supervisor. I know every corner of this county and approximately all 970 square miles. I know and have helped to protect every school, community, and unincorporated area of this county. I also raised my family here, and I want to continue to work to make Woodbury County a great place to live. As a member of the Sheriff's Office for over 30 years, I worked in and/or managed every division of the Sheriff's Office. As an administrator with the Sheriff's Office for 9 years, 8 of those years I spent working directly with the Sheriff's Office budget. I was fortunate to work closely with the board and with Dennis on those budgets, and I practiced fiscal responsibility with the taxpayers' money each time. I also had the opportunity to negotiate contracts from both sides of the table with the Deputies Association. Early on in my career, I was a union executive, and later in my career, I worked with the county to negotiate contracts with those unions. As an administrator with the Sheriff's Office, I also wrote grants for the Sheriff's Office and made applications for capital improvement projects that were submitted to the board for approval. In 2011, I was promoted to Assistant Chief Deputy under Sheriff Glenn Parrott. In January of 2013, I was promoted again to Major under Sheriff Dave Drew. Throughout my career, I always paid special attention to every decision and never took anything for granted. I made every effort to be as thorough as possible and listen to all sides. I pride myself in not making snap judgments. I believe in building sustainable budgets without cutting services. I will promise to be the voice for the rural part of this county. I am a firm believer that less government is the road to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wick. Ms. Bertrand.
Thank you, Mr. Wick.
Thank you.
First question that I would have for you is, based on your current employment, how do you see any commitments or other committee appointments that you have, and how that relates to your ability to serve as a supervisor and to serve on the assigned committees?
I've already talked to my employer about this and knew I was going to be asked about this, and he is willing to give me the time I need to properly serve on the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, and do you see any conflicts of interest
No,
with your
no.
current employment?
I think it's an advantage because I'm out at the law enforcement center site daily, working as a site superintendent for Baker Group, and I'm seeing how the building's going up, and I'm watching everything that's happening. And I see that as an advantage and not any kind of a conflict.
Okay, and once that project is complete, will you still be employed with Baker Group in the local area?
Yes, they have asked me to continue employment, and they're looking at other projects now in this area already.
Okay.
So I've already been asked, they've asked to retain me.
Okay. Can you describe the relationship between the Board of Supervisors, the other elected officials? Obviously, you have some experience with that. But again, the autonomy of the office, the relationship with each department, and
Elected-
how that's going to work.
Elected officials, in my book, are autonomous. Elected officials should work with the board, find a sustainable budget, something they can work with. But from there on out, elected officials should be left alone and allowed to run their offices the way they see fit.
Okay. And given some of the issues that we've encountered over the last couple of months or years in the urban area, or the rural areas of our county, what asset do you bring to the table? I know that you have a lot of law enforcement experience, but how would you use that experience to be able to address the initiatives and concerns of the rural environment, economic development in those areas, and how that feeds into the urban side of our community?
I think the easiest way I can approach that is I'm not a big talker. People that know me know that I don't say a lot. I listen. I'm going to listen to my constituents, to the citizens of the county, collect as much information as I possibly can before I make any decision whatsoever, and then move forward with and stick with the decision that I make.
Okay. My last question is, if you were to make one statement about yourself that would make a lasting impression, what would it be?
30 and a half years, I'm all about less government. I'm with the sheriff's office. I'm all about making Woodbury County a safe place, because if you don't have safe communities, safe schools, your community can't thrive. You've got to offer things for businesses to come in here and increase the tax base. I'm about making sure that this is a safe and prosperous place for people.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bertrand. Mr. Gill?
Good morning, Mr. Wick.
Good morning. Well, yeah, it's still morning.
Still there. Are you aware of the compensation board and why it became so controversial last year?
A little bit, yes. As I stated, I stepped away in 2020, but yeah, because of the thin blue line, the whole thing with it, yeah.
Back to blue bill.
Back to blue bill, yep.
It changed the way that the wording in the compensation board, in the code section. And it said that the sheriff has to be, they put a metric in there and said, this is what we have to do. And last year, I believe the compensation board followed the law. And so I guess I'm asking how you felt about that and the future of the compensation board, because there's been, in fact, there's legislation this year to do away again with the compensation board and put it all in the laps of the supervisors. How do you feel about that?
I have always felt, in the 30 years I spent working for the county and the 9 years that I was in an administrative position and the work that I did to help both sheriffs when I was in an administrative position, to approach a compensation board for pay raises and so forth. I've always felt that all of the elected officials in this county are underpaid, and I would support increasing their salaries at a rate that would be acceptable to everybody. But I've always, as I stated, I've always felt that salaries in the county were lower than what, being the sixth largest county in the state, I've looked at those over and over and over again throughout the years when I was with the sheriff's office. And I always felt that elected officials and on down the line, those salaries needed to be increased. And that's where I stand with those.
The way the current law is structured, it allows the compensation board just to look at factors comparing salaries with other, it's right in the code section, with other positions that are similar. But it also, in order for once they make their compensation schedule, the board, the only action that they can do as far as other elected officials is they can reduce it across the board. It provides buffer, and I believe it provides autonomy for the elected officials. So I guess to restate the question again is, do you believe that we should keep that in place? Or because last year the board actually had a resolution to support, they failed, but to support doing away with the compensation board. I guess that's specifically what I'm asking. Do you support doing away with the compensation board?
Yes, I do.
Doing away with the compensation
Yes.
board and giving it all to the Board of Supervisors?
As far as the recommendation,
No, what the current legislation is just to completely wipe out the compensation board. There would no longer be a compensation board. And it would be completely up to the Board of Supervisors to make that determination for each individual elected official.
historically, the compensation board has made recommendations as far as pay raises for elected officials, and the board hasn't followed through with those anyway. So I guess without more information, without being able to gather more information and and read or study that a little bit more, I think I would at this time resist giving you an answer as to whether or not I think the compensation board should remain in place or be done away with. I would need more information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
How do you best manage people, Mr. Wick? You were in the sheriff's department for many, many years. You would have had to manage a lot of different personalities, a lot of different character traits.
You do.
In your experience, how do you do that?
Listen, by listening. By listening because just as you stated, you've got a lot of different personality, a lot of different traits. I think you have to sit people down, talk to them individually. I know that's with a office the size of the sheriff's office, that's a large and arduous task, but it's necessary. From an administrative standpoint, if you want to get the most out of your people, you better be able to sit down and listen to them and take into consideration some of their concerns and their ideas, and do something with those so that it just doesn't appear that you're just doing it to do it. I always took advice, regardless of what the situation might have been. When I was at the sheriff's office in an administrative position, I always took advice from everyone at the sheriff's office because I know that I'm not the smartest guy in the room.
What's the one thing, if you could pick one thing from your experience in the sheriff's department that would serve you best as a board supervisor?
I'm sorry.
What's the one thing, if you could pick one thing from your experience in the sheriff's department that you think would serve you best if you were on the board of supervisors, what would it be?
Again, listening to the citizens of the county, listening to their concerns, trying to provide the best services that we possibly can with the budgets that we have to work with. We did it every year at the sheriff's office. We were limited with what we could do. Made choices as to where we were going to do things and what we had to cut out. And I think that's a lot with what the board has to do overall with the entire county.
Thank you, Mr. Wick.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hellman, come on up. Whenever you're ready, sir, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, committee, for letting me come in and talk. Sounds like there's a lot of great candidates here this morning. I'll just start by saying that I really think I'm a good candidate for this position, given my experience in Correctionville. I've got 4.5 years on the city council, 2 of those which is the mayor pro temp. 7.5 years as the mayor. I did not run for re-election in 2021, so this last year was off. Kind of needed to free my mind after all those years, figure out if I still wanted to continue on with politics, and I did miss it. So I've got the experience going to several of the county meetings as a representative, as the mayor of Correctionville, the E911 board, emergency management, the landfill, the assessor's budget meetings, and a few other things. As mayor of Correctionville, I've got experience with several projects. We expanded the city pool. We had Highway 20 expanded through town, so there was a lot of infrastructure projects involved with that at the city's expense. New signs along the highway, annexing in 17 acres, 15 and a half of those acres I helped facilitate the purchase of before I stopped being the mayor, and that area is currently being developed into commercial lots. I think economic development is a huge thing for a huge need for small towns. When David Gleiser was working for the county, I felt like he was crucial for small towns. The comprehensive plan that the county helped pay for all the small towns was huge. Correctionville was one of the towns that was able to take advantage of a loan for the grocery store, which we did pay back. And some of my experience as mayor was hiring people, budget workshops. I helped hire maintenance workers, clerk, deputy clerk. So I really feel like I have a good grasp on what the small towns need, law enforcement, ambulance service, that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Hellman. Anything
Yep.
else?
Nope, that's it.
Ms. Bertrand?
Thank you, Mr. Hillman. One question, you mentioned that you helped to facilitate the purchase of about 15 acres or so for development.
Yes.
Was that a purchase outright, or was that the use of eminent domain? And what is your position or your opinion of the use of eminent domain?
I'm not a fan of eminent domain. When we purchased that land, I had a long-standing communication with the owner of that land. It was somebody out of state. After he sold part of it for the new Dollar General, I maintained communication with him over the years. And having history with Correctionville, he wanted to see the city have control over it. So no eminent domain was involved with that.
Are you familiar with the process of eminent domain and how that is, as that is one of the large issues that is being brought to the board in terms of the carbon pipeline? I'm not exactly sure where the wind energy and the wood turbines fall into some of that. But as we look forward for renewable resources and just the other items that may be coming through rural America, what is your opinion? And how would you use your experience as the mayor of Correctionville to be able to support the community?
I'm not a fan of eminent domain. I don't have a problem with those projects if they get if they work with the landowners and get permission. I feel like if the pipeline is able to successfully find enough landowners willing to work with them, I don't have a problem with it. I don't think that any landowner should be forced to have the pipeline run through their property. Same with the windmills. You know, they're great for some farmers. My father has a couple on his land in Ida County. It's a good source of income if a farmer so desires to have that, but if they don't want them, I don't feel like they should have them. I definitely don't think they should be within a few miles of any of the towns.
Okay. Can you describe what your current employment situation and how it may or may not assist you or impact you as in your role as a supervisor and the assigned committees?
I currently work in Sioux City here down the stockyards. I work for my father, and I've worked for him since 1995. He gives me a lot of leeway as far as leaving for any meetings that I have had over the years for the city of Correctionville, or that I might have as on the board of supervisors.
Okay. Am I out of 10? Or can I ask one more question?
I don't think your time's gone off yet, has it?
Okay, can you? All right, then I'll end right there.
All right.
Thank you. I wanted those minutes for sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Heilman. I guess the question is that, I mean, it's interesting, the perspective that you can offer as far as being a mayor. And we talked about that earlier about, you know, what the city of Mobile presented to the board as far as doing some sort of agreement to help them out to get like a building inspector or something. And then we've also talked, you mentioned Dave Gleiser and economic development. So what kind of support do you think the Board of Supervisors should be able to provide to the rural towns in Woodbury County?
When it comes to the city inspector, it is definitely a big need in the smaller towns. It's too much of a hardship for one town to be able to pay for that. So I really like what they're doing. I think it would be great if the county could support that in some monetary way. I don't know to what extent that would work out with the budget, but anything that could be helped would be appreciated. I don't know if it'd be more of a county position of sorts. I don't even know if that's possible, but I think any way that the county could help support it would be greatly appreciated. A lot of the small towns have dilapidated buildings. In Correctionville, we've gone through over the last few years and torn down a bunch of old dilapidated houses trying to help increase the appeal of moving to the town, and I'm sure a lot of the small towns have that same problem. So having an inspector that's available, it's really hard to find anybody that wants to do that job. So if it's something that was incentivized with a higher pay, I think it would be huge for the county.
But you saw, apparently you saw the value in what Mr. Gleiser was doing. So do you think that position should be filled?
I do. I do.
What did he provide for you?
Like I said, he helped with the comprehensive plan that all the towns got to take advantage of, and that was huge. When you do a TIF district or anything, you got to have that comprehensive plan, so that helped us. We TIF'd the area around Dollar General, and I'm assuming that's what they're going to do with this new commercial area. One of the last things he helped us do was there was some tax credits available for new housing, And I know that Correctionville took advantage of that, and I think it was Sloan or Salix, I don't remember. So he helped facilitate getting a builder involved to repurpose some old lots and take advantage of the tax incentives. And then he was just a great sounding board. Any questions that I ever had as far as what would a business be looking for in a small town, what kind of things can we do? And unfortunately, small towns just don't have the financial needs to put in the infrastructure like propane or natural gas lines or any of that kind of stuff. So it's great to have that for the small towns. Just have somebody to soundboard off of.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything specific that you think in terms of rural economic development that's important? Or just, I mean, can you be more specific about what you think is important or what you would like to see out in the rural communities?
I think what the small towns outside of Sioux City, Sergeant Bluff, and Mobile to some extent Lawton is, I think a lot of the small towns need direction on to what things that they need to do to make the towns more attractive. Is it develop some building sites for homes? Is it building sites for light commercial projects? Grocery stores are a big need in the small towns. It's just finding the economic resources to make these things happen. I think is I don't know if that's really kind of answering your question, but
Well, how do you find the balance between serving those in the more rural communities or the smaller communities in Woodbury County versus obviously Sioux City is the biggest?
well, Sioux City has the advantage of being the main town in the county. They're on an interstate. For them to have interest, I don't think is as hard as it is for the small towns. A lot of the small towns are basically commuter towns. In Correctionville, we have people that drive to Ida Grove to work, Holstein to work, Sioux City to work, Cherokee to work. And I think that's what a lot of the small towns face, and we've got to figure out how to get a little bit of industrial work out or facilities out into the county a little bit. Maybe that's the development of another industrial park or something along 20 on the other side of the county.
Thank you, Mr. Howman.
Yep.
Appreciate your time here this morning.
Good morning or afternoon. Yep, afternoon, we're good. Declaring my intent to serve as a supervisor has been interesting. There's a lot more to it than just filling out an application, giving a speech that doesn't put you to sleep. There's behind-the-scene conversations that take place. I'm not a politician, I'm a school teacher, so this is kind of a new realm for me. I should have begun lobbying efforts months ago, according to a friend of mine that's in politics, but I didn't. I don't have a time machine. So I'll just take this time to outline my life experience, my qualifications, and then you'll have a tough choice ahead of you. There's a lot of good candidates. I don't have a personal or professional agenda here, nor am I beholden to any special interest group. I don't do this as a stepping stone to further political aspirations. I stand before you just to state that I'm willing to serve. I'm willing to help overburden taxpayers by serving on the board to provide accountability with the budget and ensure that the board is rooted in integrity. I want to guarantee that we are allocating our budget dollars to where they're going to do the most good, that farmers have what they need, the support we can offer, that the law enforcement has the tools that they need in order to keep us safe and succeed at their job, and that small businesses who are going to be the first hit in a recession when times get tough, that we're supporting them in any way we can to minimize that impact. The only I's that I really want to see in Woodbury County are the combines. I don't want to see pipelines. I don't want to see wind turbines. I want to keep our county beautiful and safe for future generations. I grew up on Camp Pendleton. It's a military base in California. My father served in the Marine Corps. I will always remember the times where yellow ribbons were tied on trees. And it was a time where it was mixed emotions. On one hand, I was very, very proud of the men and women and what they were doing. On the other, I was terrified. And that fear never really went away until my father was back home. And at times, it even transitioned to profound sadness when neighbors down the street, friends of the family, they came home, but it was in a box. And so sacrifice and the values that the men and women around me displayed on a daily basis are deeply ingrained. Values such as honor, courage, and commitment. And I want to serve on a team that emulates these values as well. My formative years were spent around people who displayed leadership, and not only displayed it, but took time to teach those around them. Leadership lessons such as integrity were a daily lesson in my household. My family returned to Sioux City after my father's retirement, and I attended West High School and eventually went to Northwestern College, where I majored in elementary education, and I've been a public school teacher ever since then. I was involved in a myriad of activities during that time that I was in leadership roles on. And through these experiences, I discovered that I was called to become a teacher. I spent time all over the world. I spent time teaching AIDS awareness to the people in Kenya. I spent 3 years teaching overseas in China in a school for foreign nationals. And I was working with people from vastly different cultural backgrounds. And yet, we were able to work together. We were able to accomplish a common task. I was appointed as the lead information and technology coordinator as I was overseas. In this position, I was responsible for researching, obtaining, installing, in-servicing new technology, hardware, and software. I developed budget proposals for the school system as far as technology was concerned. And after this, I moved back to the Siouxland area with my wife. We wanted a safe community to raise our children in. We adopted 2 older kids from the foster care system who have significant special needs. And then soon after, she gave birth to twins. So in a matter of a few months, we went from 0 to 4. Talk about hitting the ground running.
That's more than hitting the ground running, Mr. Benson.
So the past 9 years have been spent on that challenge. And so my kids are getting older, and I find that I have some more free time. And I want to continue dedicating that time to public service, both as a public school teacher and hopefully as a Woodbury County Board supervisor. I develop caring relationships with each of my students. I get to know them as people, and I use that to motivate them for improvement. My position as a teacher requires that I be an excellent communicator, display strong leadership, be a continual learner, be creative, patient, empathetic, flexible, motivating, passionate, collaborative, honest, and respectful. Teachers are always given additional responsibilities, and we're not always given the time that's needed to accomplish those tasks. And yet necessity is the mother of invention. We find creative and innovative ways to get the job done. All of these qualities will translate well to serving on the board. No one knows everything, but the best professionals in any field do their research and connect with people that can inform them and assist them. I have the desire, ability, and skill set to find these people, and if given the opportunity, I will do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Ms. Bertrand?
Thank you, Mr. Benson. As a school teacher and the commitments that you have in the classroom, how do you see how that will support your efforts as a supervisor, and if there's any either conflict of interest or an ability or inability to be accessible to the community, obviously while you're in the classroom?
Good question. As far as conflicts of interest, I don't foresee any. Again, as was stated earlier, Mr. Loomis would be a good resource to contact and on any potential conflicts of interest, and if there were any, abstaining from voting to make sure that the integrity of the board is not compromised would be critical. As far as availability goes, technology is an amazing thing. I use it to great effect with parent communication. And I think the same thing can be done with the constituents that I would be serving, whether that be rural or urban. I have a evenings and late afternoons available, and I know we have teachers that serve on the board currently, and it works. And so I don't foresee that it would be a problem.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit more on your understanding of the role of the Board of Supervisors, their relationship with the other duly elected officials, the autonomy of the office, and the role of the Compensation Board?
I will start by saying I'm not very familiar with the compensation board. That would be something that I would need to do more research on. As far as the other roles, as I stated in the application, that the board oversees the budget with input from department heads, and that the treasurer would disperse funds and manage the funds themselves. And the auditor is ensuring that those funds are being spent on what they're supposed to be as far as what was budgeted by the board.
Okay. What do you believe is the most significant issue that our county is facing today?
In my experience and from talks I've had with colleagues, both in and outside of education and neighbors, access to mental health is one that I'm very passionate about. My two older children have significant special needs, and part of this is mental health access. And it's been a very challenging experience for my wife and I to manage that bureaucracy that goes along with accessing those services, and the rarity of providers. And so I think that's an area that the board I would really need to dig into in order to serve the residents.
Okay. I think that's it for me today.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Bertrand.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gill?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Just have one question here about the working relationship between the Board of Supervisors and the other elected officials.
Sure.
In your answer here, it says that just specifically going to the sheriff, it says the board supervises the conduct of the sheriff and sets his budget. Could you expand on that?
Well, like any of the departments, right? They bring their budget proposal to the board, and the board goes through them and sees where they can cut costs or maybe make improvements, and then it's approved by the board. As far as it's my understanding that the board deals with personnel matters that might arise, and the sheriff falls under that category as well.
I guess the question is, we are autonomous elected officials, and it just seems to me that,
I'm not stating that they would remove him.
Pardon?
I'm not stating that they would remove him from office or any such thing like that, but they provide an accountability factor.
as they do through the budget for all the different independent elected officials. But it just seems here, I'm just trying to clarify this for
No, that makes
myself.
sense,
Is it says the board supervises the conduct of the sheriff. It doesn't say that about the other elected officials. there.
Right, and
But I was just wondering, I guess, what you meant by that.
correct, okay. No, that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Mr. Benson, you said something interesting to me. You said that what you do for a profession is a calling. What do you mean by that?
When I was overseas in Kenya, I was traveling around teaching AIDS awareness and doing preaching in local churches. And I felt it down to my very core that this was what I was intended to do. And so when I returned stateside, I just dove into that realm. I started off as a pre-med student, believe it or not. And chemistry quickly changed my mind on that route. But I was very blessed to discover that I want to be a teacher, and it is who I am, it's who I identify as. I enjoy working with people, whether it be the students or their parents often, counseling families through difficult times, or just celebrating the successes of their kids. But I think that's what it is to me. It's a calling. It goes beyond a mere job.
When Ms. Bertrand asked you what you thought the biggest need in the county was, you referenced the mental health
Yes, sir.
situation. And obviously, with every department, with every body, every governmental body, there's limited resources, right?
Correct.
So that's just something that everyone has to work within.
Correct.
So how do you prioritize that? I mean, if that's what you believe the biggest concern or biggest need in our county is, how do you prioritize that with secondary roads? How do you prioritize that with law enforcement? How do you prioritize that with any other number of issues that the County Board of Supervisors has to face every week when they gather on Tuesday? How do you go about that process?
Lots of discussion. I think it's important that people with multiple viewpoints are at the table to discuss why they have the need for various funds, and for people who it affects to be vocal with said representatives, who then can take that knowledge to the discussion. It's always going to be a hard thing to balance everything. There's just not enough money in the world. But I think there's ways that we can be creative to make it happen, whether it's enticement for practitioners to come to the area, which would then increase your tax base by having residents move into the area, especially high-paying professionals. We open ourselves up for legal challenges if we're not providing services that are needed. I think of the foster to adoptive system. Part of that process is that all mental health services are provided. The problem is they're not available. And so balancing availability with our responsibility to provide what we say we're going to provide. There's going to be hard discussions. I mean, secondary roads, as I was reading through the board notes, there's that $10 million project coming up on secondary roads. It would be interesting to dig into that and see what are we doing there? Are we just resurfacing every road for X number of miles? Or are we targeting the soft spots in the roads? Are we looking at putting geotech cloth underneath of crushed concrete in order to stabilize it for the long term? Or are we just doing a quick Band-Aid fix? So I think there's things like that we can look at and see where we can free up funds for other projects.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Appreciate your time here this morning.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mr. McNaughton, come forward and go ahead and begin whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you for having me up here. I'm glad you didn't call lunch and make me wait another hour. I'm going to talk about some specific issues that come to my mind when you talk about why am I running. One of the issues is to complete some existing projects. One of them, of course, is the Law Enforcement Center, which I can use my construction knowledge and to help monitor the project and maintain construction costs. Along with that, and this is where I kind of deviate off the normal track, is I'm an advocate for social programs, and one of them being drug courts. I'm a big supporter of drug courts. And the other issue that I have, because of the pandemic that's been going on for the last 3 or 4 years, when I talk to people out in the community, people say, oh, my grandkid quit school. Oh, my child quit school. And, we're talking 10th grade, 11th grade, seniors, and kids are just lost. And one of the problems I think we got coming is if on a countywide basis, because this isn't a Sioux City problem or a Lawton problem or wherever you live, this is a community problem that we've got to design some sorts of intervention or our jail will be full of our youth and because they're lost. And so, part of my skill is, and always has been throughout my career, is developing interventions, getting the right people in the room, and then try to get solutions to help push people back on the right track. I'm real concerned about that particular problem. The other two things that kind of sit in my plate is the development of rural areas. And as a county, we need to promote some sort of incubator businesses. I know there's been some questions about, should we have a economic development position? Personally, I think we do need it. I think we need to get some love out into the rural areas. I think we've done well in the metro area because that's easy. But it's not as easy out in the metro, or out into the rural areas. One, maintaining the physical structure. And when I say that, I'm talking bridges, roads, highways. And the other one is we aren't, as a county, highlighting what other businesses are doing in our county, such as, I'm going to use an example of one of the companies, Western Iowa Telephone, who has upgraded their fiber optics within quite a large area of Woodbury County, that we've got internet speeds that are unbelievable out in the rural areas. So as a county supervisor board and entity, we need to show support and love to the rural areas by, promoting that this stuff is available, promoting we have good physical structures, and promoting these smaller towns to try and get, 2 or 3 people businesses in there. Nothing large because they really can't support that either. But if we can get small businesses that could be in the rural area, then out of that becomes a solution to one of the other major problems that I think we have in the county. And that is we need to show a tremendous amount of support for our rural fire departments and ambulance services. I think the Board of Supervisors did an excellent job a couple of years ago when they started to develop EMS system out in Climbing Hill, but we still rely on the fire departments, the volunteers at the fire departments and the ambulances in the small towns. That being said, if there aren't people out in these rural communities living there, working there, that can man these during the day, it's a real problem. At night, these people are totally go to helping with fire or with ambulance services, but they need help, and they need the help, during the work hours. So how do we create some sort of environment that we can get people out there working so that they're available to serve on these volunteer departments? And with that, I'd be willing to field your questions.
Thank you, Mr. McNaughton. Ms. Bertrand.
Thank you, Mr. McNaughton. So what would you say is your strongest asset that would be able to accomplish some of these items that you listed as in terms of the areas that would need additional support? So in social services, or if it's to attract smaller businesses out to the rural community, or to further support our fire safety and ambulance and EMT services?
Well, if you go through my career, you'll see that a lot of my career has been designing and implementing interventions either with employees or processes. And what I mean by that is what I would do is be in meetings, identify problems, which that's what I was talking about, problems, is you go out and you meet with the different groups that are involved with this, and then you start to put together interventions. Now, nothing ever happens right away. So you make these interventions, and the first thing you have to do is not attach your ego to it, because then you go back to the people that need to use it, and they'll shoot holes through it, because people don't want to change. It's how they are, that's humans. So what you do is you present it to them, you find out what holes they're going to shoot in it, and then you redesign. Again, keeping your ego out of the way, you try to implement or bring in these problems they see with your possible intervention, and you keep doing that process. And it's kind of a thankless deal, and it's a long-term deal. It doesn't happen. These interventions don't happen. I start today, and the intervention is in 90 days. I'll give you an example. I designed an intervention for a large employer because they never had operators for their lines. And what they would do is they'd just work the people to death because nobody's ever trained to run these equipment. So what I went to them and said, you know, you're good at doing your manufacturing. I said, instead of the product you make, I said, put in the name of training in that spot and then handle it the same way. You're great at forecasting when you need your product. You're great at getting the ingredients in, but you're horrible at having your manpower because it's always out of your budget. So I developed the whole process, would take it to the line supervisors or the managers, and they would shoot holes through it. And I would redesign it. And finally, I left that employer, but 4 years later, I got a call that they implemented what I had been designing. So that probably took a total of 6 years. And the last 2, I wasn't even there, but the idea was put in place and possible ways that it could work. So that's how you do it. You just have to keep your ego out of the way and just keep listening. So.
Thank you, Mr. McNaughton. Mr. Gill?
Thank you. Thank you for applying. Over the years, as I've run for office and talked to people, especially in the rural areas, I've heard this concern is that the Board of Supervisors that lacks a lot of rural representation over the years. It's been true. In Iowa, there are 3 plans that you can have board representation. Plan number 1 is that everybody runs at large. You could have 5 supervisors on the same block in Sioux City. Plan 2 is what we have currently. That is, you have to run for a district, but you're voted on countywide. And then Plan 3 is a plan that actually is pretty predominant in the state of Iowa, and that's where supervisors run from districts and are elected from districts. Do you think that would improve representation for the rural area of Woodbury County?
Not really. I don't mind the system we have, the way it's kind of divvied up. Probably my only angst against the system we have is out in the rural area, as evident today, when a position is open, you have 8, 9, 10 people run. So, you know, that tells me there's a lack of attention spent on the rural area. When you look at the other districts, many times you can barely get one person to run. So I don't have such a angst with the way we do it. I just think we need to be more promoting that it's an entire county board. You know, that and get people involved from all 5 districts that really want to help the whole county, because we kind of all live and die together. You know, the economic development of Sioux City proper in the metro area is great for rural Woodbury County because it brings in jobs. But again, some of the things I talked about, that's also what's destroying rural Woodbury County. So, you know, I guess in a nutshell, I don't have a problem with what we're doing. I just think we need to be, you know, just a little more clear on how we're trying to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, Mr. McNaughton. Appreciate your time here today. How do you prioritize? You came up here with a list of your potential possible issues that you think should be focused on. How do you prioritize those things?
Well, sometimes I mean, how I would prioritize, of course, one of them is finish what we got going, which is the jail. I mean, that's a huge check mark. Then I would look at some easy things, and the first one is the drug courts because they're already existing. I would just like to see them more prominent and more talked about and used as much as possible. And then after that, you've got to start getting feedback because there are things that are kind of in place, like I said, small businesses out in the area, the fiber optics is going in different towns. I know we've been working on the physical structure because I can see the construction out in rural Woodbury County. So I know that's happening. So, I put fires out, but then I like to start projects way in advance of when they're needed. Like I said, one of my angst is all these dropouts in school, because the parents and the grandparents are complaining, all the kid does is drink beer or smoke pot. Well, if you aren't educated and you don't have a job, that leaves you, very few avenues to go to meet your needs, and that's either selling drugs or stealing. And, we're seeing kind of an uptick of young kids. So I think, that would be one of the places is trying to get the people together. How do you do an intervention on that? What are we going to put in place to start nudging people back to where they belong? Because I don't believe in locking up our youth. I mean, I'm absolutely opposed to that. There's got to be a better solution than having them in the system. So, you kind of look at it, you meet with people and you figure out where the biggest bang for the buck and where you're going to put your resources.
You were talking about emergency responders out in the county and how those are all volunteer services that people donate their time and their resource and their energy into. Are there specific examples that you have or that you're aware of where things haven't gotten done because of the problem that you're talking about not having the people there during the day?
I also serve as a trustee on one of the fire departments in Woodbury County, Banner Township. So we're very lucky in Lawton because we are a bedroom community. There are a few businesses there, and we have some retired people that are very, very energetic about volunteering their time. But they're also up in their 70s. And so that parade's going to kind of come to an end, and we see a problem coming. I'll take an example of one of my cohorts here of Correctionville, when they lost their Titan machinery employer, that was about 10 people on their fire department, and that really hurt them because then it was very difficult for them to man their fire station and equipment correctly. We do a lot of reciprocation with other towns, and many times, the call will go to Bronson, but if everybody's gone, then the call's got to go to Lawton, and if everybody there's at work, then the call's got to go to Mulville. Well, to get an ambulance somewhere, by the time you figure out that each town doesn't have a representative to take the equipment out, because, the county has hired people to help, but they still need that ambulance there. Or they still need that fire department there, or they need the second hand there. So there are examples all the time, and through reciprocating, they are covering themselves, but it gets tougher every year. Now, one of the other big...
Mr. Benson, or Mr. McNaughton, I ran out of time with you. That was a long question, so I'm going to have to stop, okay? I heard my buzzer go off, but I thank you for coming in and interviewing here this morning, okay?
Yep, thank you.
Mr. McNaughton. Okay, the next thing on the agenda this afternoon is the discussion of the voting process. I believe last time during our meeting that the deliberation process will be tomorrow morning to begin at 10 o'clock a.m. down in the basement. And as I recall, and what the notes that I have is that the deliberation process will be for the committee members to move for the appointment of an applicant, followed by a second motion for said applicant, Discussion will be held by the committee members. There will be no public input or discussion during this period of time. Following discussion, a vote will be taken. The applicant will be appointed by a majority vote of the committee. Is that still how the committee intends to move forward tomorrow during the deliberation process? Mr. Gill?
What I just wanted to put before you is that there isn't really any code section that governs what we do, how we do it. In looking at Robert's Rules of Order for small assemblies, I just want to explain is that there are two things that we're looking for in this process. The first is the nomination process, and then the actual voting on it. So during that, in a small assembly, just want to make sure that you're aware that the chairperson has full participation. Let's talk about the nomination process first, is that the nomination process, we talked about a motion and second. That's traditionally how it's done, but it is not required in a small assembly. Is when you make a nomination, just go on that, you open the floor. It's called the chair nomination process. The chair opens the floor, and then all members, including the chair, can offer a nomination. And it doesn't need to be seconded, so that's what I was wondering if, first for the nomination process, because it is just 2 votes, is that the way that this committee wants to do that?
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Ms. Bertrand, do you have any input on that?
I think we need to have some real discussion in terms of how we're going to actually wade through this. We have 9 people, all bringing very different experience, yet very valuable experience to the process and to a position as a supervisor. One concern that I would have right now, if the first person gets nominated and, you know, it's how we're going to wade through and try to decipher, because the first one up, maybe they're the first person, they're the only person, and then again, they might not be.
Right, and that's what I believe occurred when you were up, is that the Board of Supervisors, that was the only person considered, right? Nomination and voted on it.
Correct.
And how did you feel about that process?
I was the one selected, so of course I agreed with it.
Worked great.
Worked great, yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is, because if you do the nomination in a second, that pretty much, at that point, determines the vote. And not necessarily, but it does. If we're asking for a second, that's what I'm trying to get to here in this process.
In the absence, if we are asking for a second, and I believe that the Board of Supervisors had a little bit different as an assembly, as a larger group, if the nomination or a motion was made and was not seconded, then it would have died at that
Yes.
point in time.
Yes.
And so as I'm understanding the rules, as a small committee, we are not required to have the second.
That's
So we
correct.
can nominate, or we can elect to have the second to decide if somebody is nominated and it's not seconded, then we move to the next person on the list.
I just want to, traditionally, each member is allowed to make one nomination. If they, just say if the chairperson opened the floor to nominations, there could be 3 nominations, and then you would go through that process of the election process after that.
Okay, and would there be discussion on all 3 prior to the election process?
That'd be up to the committee, the chairperson to allow that or not.
I think it's important to have discussion. I think that that's fair to all the candidates who've taken their time and to come and present and offer what they think their ideas are and what they bring to the table. So I think that's only fair to them to have discussion about any candidate that's nominated.
I would agree.
So, how do we want to move forward then? Is that the process we want to
I
go
still,
through?
just to decide on the nomination
Okay,
process.
so in terms of the nomination process itself, is there a motion for what that process should be? Should we have the chair nomination process that Mr. Gill has just outlined? Is there a motion for that? Without a sec, does that make sense? So we're not gonna, as I understand it, we don't have a second, we just,
That's what we're considering right now.
okay,
And each member has the ability to nominate?
Yes,
yes.
So there could be a potential of 3.
yes.
All 3 of us could nominate the same person. I mean, it's 8 people, it could be hard, but, you know, we could all nominate the same person, or we can all each nominate a separate individual.
Right.
Correct.
So that's, then we'll do it just
Okay.
nomination without a second,
So nomination without a second is what we've
agreed to?
put forward and agreed to. Let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so that vote passes 3-0. So that's the process that we will go through with the nomination process.
Can you repeat who the first and second was on that?
Oh, I think Ms. Bertrand was first on that.
Yes, I was first on that.
Bertrand, second by Gill.
Sorry, Michelle. Moving on then to the voting process. Mr. Gill, anything that you want to talk about?
There are ways that you can do it by voice vote. The only important thing I think is, and it goes back to the supervisors too, is that each vote needs to be recorded so everyone knows. So that eliminates a secret ballot. You can do it by voice vote, you can do it by a show of hands, or you can do it by roll call vote.
Ms. Bertrand, any thoughts on that process?
I would probably elect to do a voice vote.
Voice vote? Okay. I'll second that.
Okay. Motion, second motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
So the voting process, motion carries, so we'll do a voice vote.
And then the chair will call the result, recording the vote of each member.
The chair will record or note the vote of each member. Okay, so just in review, so that our process is clear to everyone, including the applicants themselves. So tomorrow morning, we begin the deliberation process at 10 o'clock down here in the basement. The nomination process will happen first. That we just discussed what that process would be in terms of all 3 being able to put forth a nomination. There will be discussion so that we have an opportunity to fully vet and discuss all the applicants or the nominations as put forward. Once that is done, then we will have the vote. Each vote will be recorded. It will be a voice vote, and the chair will document or note the votes of each committee chairperson. Is that an agreement with everyone, Ms. Bertrand?
Yes.
Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Anything further for the good of the order? By Ms. Bertrand?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Gill, anything else?
Nothing here.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming in this morning and the application process. We appreciate your time. And do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting for this morning?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion is adjourned. We will see everyone tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wore my best suit.
I like the top.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
It was quicker than I thought it